A lot of parents tell me their first weeks of homeschooling are shaky, like they've already messed something up before they've even started. And if that's you, you're in the right place. I'm Sue Patterson, and this is the Unschooling Mom to Mom podcast. After decades of unschooling my own kids and talking to thousands of other parents, I'm here to reassure you that it doesn't have to look like school to count as real learning. And what's been going on these past few weeks at your house? It's all an experiment. You're learning what's working and what's not working. So let's dive in. When you first start homeschooling, or even just thinking about unschooling, you probably have a picture in your mind of what it's going to look like. You've set up a little desk, or you buy some colorful curriculum packages. You've sketched out the schedule. You've imagined how your child is going to happily cooperate. And then reality shows up. Your child says no, or they roll their eyes, or they'd rather play outside or build with Lego or get on YouTube. And suddenly all your planning is falling apart. You're thinking, did I make a mistake? This is not what I thought it was going to look like. That shaky start is so common. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human, but it also means some other things too. Plans can collapse quickly because they're usually based on what school is supposed to look like in our own minds. We're carrying all those schooly memories and expectations, and sometimes pressure from grandparents or neighbors or even our own inner critic. But our kids didn't sign up for school at home. They didn't raise their hands and say, yes, I'd like 7 subjects all lined out every single day and then a quiz on Friday. For example, I remember trying to bring spelling in for Katie. She had this enormous capacity for memorizing. Part of that was her neurodiversity and being on the spectrum. But she wanted nothing to do with my rote lists that I had. That schooly part just wasn't going to work. But then later, when she was a young teen, she started writing fan fiction, and being able to spell better made a difference. There was a reason. She realized how important it was, and she started to figure it out. She had me prove some things. She paid more attention to where the misspellings were. She started to see patterns, and her spelling took off. The context made all the difference. She didn't need those little spelling lists at ages 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 to do well. So if your careful planning is falling flat, it's not because you're a bad parent or a bad homeschooling mom or a bad unschooler. It's because you're discovering what actually fits your child. And here's where the tension shows up. You want your child to learn. You have an idea of what you think they're supposed to be learning. And you want to prove that this decision is working. And when it doesn't look like the plan, you want to clamp down to fix it. But unschooling asks us to do something different. It asks you to pause and to listen and to trust. So my son Michael is a great example. He didn't learn his times tables in the traditional way. When he was in school, they did time tests, and they totally freaked him out. He would spend the whole time staring at the timer. So when I brought him home, I thought, nope, we're not doing that. And he learned skills like times tables from playing video games and needing to count quicker. It kept crossing his path, so it was useful for him to learn it. And we played a lot of multiplication rock songs back then. I think that helped. I don't know if that really helped, but it was fun. Do you remember those? I did put up a times table chart in the bathroom so they would see it and it would cross their eyeballs, but I honestly don't think they really consulted it while they were in there. Not doing math in a traditional way didn't stop anybody from being able to do fine with college level math when the time came. Michael got his MBA, even magna cum laude, passing algebra and statistics with A's. Alyssa runs $1 million business that runs a payroll and does inventory. No traditional math. No typical academic coursework in her younger years. And Katie's actually my bookkeeper. So all 3 of them don't avoid math in their adult lives. It just isn't weighted differently than anything else. But they didn't memorize their times tables, and it's perfectly okay. So that tension you might be feeling, that worry that they're not keeping up with what feels familiar for kids to learn at a certain age, it's all rooted in school thinking, not real learning. It's about being successful in school, not being successful as adults. So how do you move through this shaky start that happens in September? First, see the kid's resistance as feedback. If your child is pushing back, it's information. It's not a sign of failure, it's data. Observe instead of tightening the control. We tend to think if we just tighten it a little bit, they'll do it our way. But what are they choosing if you step back? That's where their energy is. And third, notice what you're saying to yourself about all of this. They're uncooperative. They don't appreciate me. My mom was right. This is a bad idea. I'm not good at this. So then when you have those thoughts, let's check the validity. When you say they're uncooperative, what could they be trying to tell you about how they like to learn? Where do you see more cooperation throughout the week? Or if you're saying to yourself, they don't appreciate me, that's not their job. That's your job. You're the one who has to look in the mirror and like your choice. School taught you to always look for approval from someone else. And maybe now you're transferring that to your kids. You want their approval for it. The good news is this is all within your power. You can remind yourself of all the good things that you're doing and talk to yourself as if you were a good friend. List off all the things that you're doing right. Also, getting appreciation from kids, that's a parenting thing that is not just homeschooling and unschooling parents. All parents have this feeling. And it could have to do with the people pleasing that we were conditioned to do for all of those years. And maybe you do need to cultivate a culture of gratitude in your home. I actually have an unschooling guide that I put out every November, and I can go ahead and put that in the shop now if that's something that you would like to work on with the kids. Maybe you're thinking, my mom was right. This was a bad idea. Well, the first thing to do is to remind yourself that you are the grown-up here. You are your child's advocate. You don't have to do what your parents did or what they tell you you should do. You're not a child anymore, and they don't get a vote in your adult life. You've learned some things along the way, and the world is a completely different place than the way it was when they were raising kids. So, two things to counter that. Make a list of your reasons why this is a good idea. Why is this the best choice for your kids and your family? And if you want to go deeper, the Unschooling Guide for Critics and Naysayers has a lot of really great scripts that you can use and ideas to explore what's underneath all of this. It'll get you on steadier ground when you're dealing with anyone who's a critic, friends, family, spouse, yourself. So maybe what you're thinking is, I'm not good at this. Starting something new is messy. Most people don't begin new things with a completely formed skill set. I can tell you from experience, where you start is not where you're going to finish. We learn along the way about ourselves, about our kids, about how people learn, about how people react to coercion and control, and we make adjustments along the way. Listening to podcasts like this, but also learning more about how unschooling and deschooling works. This will help you move through the hard part quicker. You probably need more than a weekly podcast pep talk. I do have an Unschooling 101 course and a course about learning math without curriculum. Both of those are really helpful. I have all the unschooling guides, and for the rest of this month, for the next couple of days, the price is slashed. So if you're a DIY person, this is probably for you. Maybe your self-discipline isn't your strong suit, and you need a group of parents to do this with, or more coaching from me throughout the week. That's where the membership comes in. I'll put a link to the options for that too, because the annual membership is still on sale for a few more days, or you can do it month to month. Whatever works to help you navigate this. Just remember, the shaky start is really just your first draft. You get to revise as you go. And rough drafts are always messy. The important part is noticing and adjusting and staying connected to your child. Don't think of it as they're being behind. You may just need to pivot. Your choices may have sounded good, but they're not fitting the real live people in your family. This is a process of learning how to learn together. The only real roadmap is tuning into what's happening around you and adjusting accordingly. It's not about checking boxes in a curriculum or copying what someone else says is the right thing to do. You're the one standing there looking at your child. You know them best. You just have to open up to ideas that you maybe didn't consider before. So I'm going to do something different with this podcast. Typically, we'd stop right here, about the 10-minute mark. And for some of you, that's enough, and you're ready to move on with your week. But I'd like to talk about some of the concerns and the issues that have popped up pertaining to these shaky Septembers. I actually did a podcast a couple years ago called that. I'll link it, but it prompted some questions. So I thought I'd share some of the most common ones that I hear from parents. So stay with me and we'll tackle a few of them. Question number 1. How do I know whether to stick with my original homeschool plan or change it when things aren't going well? Super common question. Most of us start out with a really organized plan. Looks great on paper. But then real life, real kids step in. And the moment you notice your child is resisting or that you're dreading the day and that learning feels like a tug of war, that's a sign it's time to adjust. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you're paying attention. You're not just pushing through because you have a scope and sequence that has to be completed. Lots of people left school because they felt like their kids were just cogs in a wheel. Let's not do that at home too. You don't have to at all. Think of it as data. Your child is giving you feedback. In unschooling, the ability to pivot is a strength, not a weakness. Question number 2. What does letting kids lead really look like, especially when I feel like everything's falling apart? Letting kids lead doesn't mean that you disappear into the other part of the house or become passive. It means you observe what they're naturally drawn toward, and then you support it. If your child spends the whole week building Legos, that's not wasted time. That's engineering and storytelling and problem solving. It looks messy from the outside, but it's powerful learning. Your role is to connect the resources, add variety, and cheer them on, not drag them back to what's not working. So this can happen when playing video games too, or make-believe, or all kinds of things that kids are interested in. They're showing you their interests. Lean toward it so you can see what they like about it, where the learning is hiding, because it's in there. That's why we say things like stop referring to their use of technology as screen time. It's so much more than that. They're learning to read and to do math, and they're learning about other civilizations and history. They're learning how to interact with other people, how to lead, how to persevere. But you won't see that. But you won't know that if you're dismissively saying all they do is screen time. That's your red flag to see what's actually going on. I did a whole webinar on technology that I'll link to if you want to go watch that. Or you can grab the Unschooling guide about technology. If you need some additional tools and you've decided you're ready to tackle this. We spend a lot of time talking about our kids and technology in the membership group. So even if you just come for a couple of months, it might help. Okay, question number 3. But what about the basics? Math, reading, writing. Won't my kids fall behind if we don't make those a priority right away? This is the one that keeps parents up at night, I think. And I get it, because we've all been told the school approach is the way to master the basics. But here's the radical shift. Kids learn the basics in everyday life. Math shows up in cooking and gaming and budgeting and managing money. Reading comes alive when kids care about the content, whether it's a game instruction or a recipe or their favorite graphic novel. Writing grows out of purpose, texting friends, creating stories, making lists. None of this requires a rigid curriculum to cover the basics. Often when I'm talking to parents in places like the Unschooling Mom to Mom Facebook group, someone will say, unschooling is great, but certainly you don't mean blowing off reading and math. My kids need to be prepared to go out into the world, and that means the basics. At least reading and math, it's a requirement. Here's the thing. I never said I don't value reading and math. And I never said that unschoolers don't learn reading and math. I'm just saying that you don't have to go about it like they did in school. When you're creating a full, rich, unschooling life, you're reading to them. You're mentioning that billboard sign that you drove past, that the letter is the same as the letter in their first name. Or you're putting a grocery list up on the fridge, or maybe even the steering calendar. Words are in their lives. And that's the foundation. The pre-reading pile of knowledge that's going to help them move toward reading. It works the same for math. You're helping them build their own data bank, and it's going to support them as they learn how to read and do math. So I'm not saying do nothing and it'll all work out. I mean, truthfully, it probably would. Because as humans moving through our days, we do need to read and do math. And that's the biggest catalyst for learning it, needing it. Arbitrary, someday you'll need this, those comments fall flat. And sometimes they're not even true. Yes, of course, I have a reading and a math unschooling guide, and they're both really good. And I have the math course about learning math without curriculum if you're more of a video person than a PDF person. Those can help you see where all the math is throughout the day and how to make that the focus instead of the curriculum. But it's all about noticing and maybe doing a few things within your home to make it more math or reading rich. The other part of that question, though, is won't my kids fall behind? And my question is, fall behind who? When you're individualizing the learning for your children, you're not in some comparison trap. There's no bell curve. There's no class ranking. They're in a class of one. They're not competing with themselves. They're simply adding more knowledge and growth every day. So if you're worried, don't all 8-year-olds need to learn their times tables, or don't all 12-year-olds need to memorize parts of speech? The quick answer is no, they don't. They can learn it when they need it. If it's important, they will need it, and it will make sense to them to learn it. No resistance, no power struggles. They'll want whatever knowing those things provides. So they'll have the motivation to learn it. So if you're worried about falling behind, you need to do a little more deschooling. I have tons of resources at the website on deschooling, and even an entire YouTube playlist. We did a 30-day deschooling challenge in the membership group. It's broken down into smaller components. So that's over there if you need that. But it's important to shift away from the schooly mindset that all students need to be standardized, that everyone needs to be led through exactly the same materials at exactly the same time, as if one size fits all. We know that it doesn't. We know that's not the best way. So let's not hang on to those ideas and keep making comparisons to a system we're not even part of anymore. Instead, look back 6 months or a year. What can they do now that they couldn't do before? Not even necessarily from an academic standpoint. That's just one piece. How are they moving through the world differently? Notice their progress. Pay attention to what you could do to make their lives fuller and richer, and give them more opportunities that fit them, not some system that isn't even a factor in your life anymore. Okay, question number 4. What if my child resists everything I suggest? Doesn't that mean they'll never learn discipline? Resistance usually tells us more about the fit than the child. If what you're offering feels irrelevant or forced, kids push back. And honestly, we do too as adults. Think about taking on a project that feels pointless. You drag your feet too. Find something else to do. So instead of doubling down, try offering choices or shifting the environment. Discipline doesn't grow out of compliance. It grows from self-motivation, from the experience of following their own curiosity and seeing it through. And I think most people really know this. That's why they say things like, kids need to learn to have grit. It's just that we don't have to teach them that. They learn it when they want to get something that they don't have the skill set for yet. They suddenly have the motivation. We see it all the time with kids leveling up on video games. They're frustrated, they get mad, then they go back and they try it again. That's grit. And this happens in lots of different areas where kids are playing. They keep trying and they keep trying, and then they get it. They're building and then rebuilding. Where I think parents get off course is they're trying to use this grit concept with things they want the kids to do. But the kids aren't seeing the point, so they're resisting. And then the parents see that as a lack of grit. That's not grit. Grit is internal. So sometimes when I'm talking with parents, they'll pivot a little. You may have done that just now. You may be thinking, well, okay, that makes sense about the grit thing, but they can't always have their own way. What about when they get a job and their boss says they have to do something and they don't want to? They'll be used to always taking the easy route and they won't do it, and then they'll lose their job and blame their boss. Have you ever thought that? Or heard someone say it? It's really common. So let's break it apart. They can't always have their way. I don't think anyone says this is happening. We're still saying things like, time to get ready to go, or can you feed the dog, or no, that shirt doesn't fit anymore. You're not going to be able to wear that out of the house. The list goes on and on where we have to ask them to do something in their life that they don't really want to do. Sure, we try to find the yes wherever we can. What piece of their request could we say yes to? As the gatekeeper to most of the things in their lives. That's just a kinder way to live. But they are not always getting their way. That's just fear with a megaphone in your head. Maybe it's someone else's voice. Maybe it's something you heard as a child. Maybe there's even a little resentment that they're getting to have such a great life and you didn't get to, and they should be more appreciative. And then you start down that track. All of these are things to examine, but they're not always having their way. Notice the reality of that. And as for that part about how will you hold down a job, maturity is an interesting thing. It allows us to do a cost-benefit analysis. We can weigh it out. Do we want to keep the job? Do we have bills to pay? Should we quietly start looking for another job? These are the kinds of things our brains can do when we've acquired a little more maturity. But we don't have to make them practice a home environment such that they can have practice enduring a bad work environment in their future. If that's the case, just send them to school for that. Practice for a bad work environment where nobody listens to you and you just have to do as you're told and you're in trouble if you don't and bells ring and then you're released. My guess is that you're aspiring for a little more than that. So question number 5 is, how do I balance my own expectations with what my child actually wants, especially when they're so far apart? Well, this is the heart of the shaky start for many parents. We come in with our hopes and our fears and our timelines, but kids have their own pace and passions. The key is noticing where those expectations come from. Are they from your own school experience, from comparison with neighbors, or from your child's actual needs? When you let go of those shoulds, you make room for collaboration. That doesn't mean your values disappear. It means you learn ways to live them alongside your child. You know, sometimes we hear the word child-led. I think you do better to replace that with partnership parenting. Both parents and children have input, but sometimes the parent is leading and sometimes the child is leading. It all depends on the situation. So you have that top-down, authoritarian, my way or the highway approach versus the child-led, everything is as the child wants. And successful unschooling is neither of those. This is why it's hard. It's not black and white like that. It's gray. Lots of gray. And some days we're irritable and we make everything hard for everyone. So then you have to look at, what do you need as a parent? This will help you set the stage for your kids to be successful. In 12-step programs, they talk about something called HALT, H-A-L-T. Don't let yourself get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. We don't make good decisions when that's happening. And I think it applies to parenting too. Sometimes it really helps to talk with other parents about how they're navigating all of this. We have our familiar way, or even the story we've created in our heads, but we don't have a lot of experience with this partnership way. And it's not a switch to flip. It's a process of learning and unlearning. You have to be patient with yourself and with your child, but you also have to show yourself some other ways that it could work. Social media can help you a little bit with that, and my membership group can really help you do that. I'll give links to all of these in the notes. So if your beginning feels shaky, you're in good company. Every unschooling family I've ever known has bumps and doubts. The gift is learning to see it all, not as failures, but as invitations. Invitations to connect more deeply, to trust more fully, and to remember that learning is happening all around you. So thanks for staying with me through this Q&A. I hope you heard the reassurance that you needed today. Check the show notes for all the links to the additional resources, including our September sales for the Parenting Toolkit and the annual membership. It's all at the website, unschoolingmomtomom.com. Enjoy the kids and happy unschooling.